Good day everyone, this is Junaid Khan, a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. Well, there's a huge change which was not really expected earlier in 2025, but it is here and we have to announce it. Not going to be any good news for the temporary foreign workers in Canada. But it has been posted on immigration website or the Canada.ca website on January 14th that the changes to the open work permits for the family members of temporary residents. There are going to be changes specifically for the spousal open work permits for those people who are currently in Canada as the students on a postgraduate work permit, and especially the people over here on temporary foreign workers. So what is going to be happen? There are going to be three different categories and changes in three different categories. Let's talk about it. Number one, especially for students, international students, it has been announced earlier that some of the categories where international students were not allowed to basically apply for their spouses for the work permit. Who are allowed at that moment or even today? If you are in a master's program or if your program is 16 months or longer, number one. Secondly, the doctoral programs. And third, there are some professions which are eligible for apply for their spouses. Now, these professions you are going to find in the immigration website, otherwise the video is going to be very long. But these are the people who were allowed to apply for their spouses, and they are currently allowed to do so. But you have to be specific for the master's program, 16 months or longer, and the doctoral program. So they are going to be there. But if after studying or after doing specifically the major change happened for the people who are actually in Canada on temporary foreign workers. Before, the temporary foreign workers were allowed to apply for the spousal open work permit for their spouses around the globe, but now immigration has announced that these are going to be specific for the category of their work and the tier they're working on. So now, effective on January 21st, only people which are allowed to apply for their spouses who are working on tier 0 and 1 category. So if your job is in tier 0 and 1 category, you can apply for your spouses for their work permits. But if you are in category 1 or 2, there are some specific areas which will be available, and these are very specific now, so I have made a notes about it. If you are in a healthcare, if you are in sports, some sectors and military, there are some applied and natural sciences programs, and if you are working in natural resources, these are the few categories. And again, it will be announced on January 21st, the actual categories. If you are working in one of those sectors, if you are working in one of those categories in Canada, then you will be eligible to apply for the spousal open work permit if you are working in tier 1 and tier 2. So tier 0 and 1, any sector you're working in Canada, regardless of healthcare, regardless of the list of departments I've just mentioned, you will be eligible for spousal open work permit. People who are working in tier 1 and tier 2, they are going to be only available, the spousal open work permits are only going to be available who are working in certain sectors. So you have to make sure if you're in tier 1 or tier 2, you have to be working in those specific sectors. If you are not, then you would not be eligible to apply for the spousal open work permit. Unfortunately, people who are working in tier 3 and tier 4 categories, they are not going to be eligible to apply for their spouses, and this is unfortunate, but this is happening in the earlier days of 2025. It's a little sad news, to be honest, because people who come to Canada, and specifically who are married, the family unification is an important matter. Your spouses are supposed to accompany you in Canada, and it has been happening in the past, but this is not going to be the same in future. Another thing is, definitely, spouses of the temporary foreign workers, they are going to impact the huge numbers in Canada. So now they are going to cut down. Overall, if you think about it, if you've been in touch with the Canadian immigration and checking previous videos and notices and what has been happening, there are going to be significant decrease in temporary foreign workers and any sort of temporary visas in Canada. I mean, there is a decrease in the visa application. Study permit has been stricken up a little bit, and now we have come to the spouses as well. There's one important thing you might see on your screen as well, or in a couple of minutes maybe, which I wanted to read it out exactly as is mentioned in the notice, that dependent children of foreign workers will no longer be eligible. Even the workers who are eligible for their spousal open work permits. Let me read it out, the whole sentence, so I'll be more clear to for you guys to understand. So the foreign workers must also have at least 16 months remaining on their work permits. I'm going to come to that topic. At the time when their spouse applies for the open work permit, full stop, and then dependent children of foreign workers will no longer be eligible. So first of all, on this particular point, you will not be able, even if you are a worker, I'm not talking about students anymore, if you are a temporary foreign worker in Canada and your own work permit, you are the principal applicant now. If your own work permit is expiring in less than 16 months, you won't be able to apply for the spousal open work permit. So we have to understand what's going on in this video. First of all, students, there are specific categories. If you are a student, international student in Canada, there are only specific categories. If you are in, you can apply for spousal open work permit. That's one point. Second point I mentioned, if you are not a student, if you are a temporary foreign worker in Canada, and if you are working in tier 0 and 1, you are eligible to spousal open work permit. If you are in tier 1 and 2, you have to be in a specific domain. On top of my mind, there are healthcare, there are natural resources, some of the military designations, and then there were applied sciences. So the complete list will be available on January 21st when it is going to be effective. There is still time to make the application. And this third point, that if you are a temporary foreign worker in Canada and your work permit is basically active for less than 16 months, you are not going to be eligible to apply for your spouses and the open work permit. This is going to impact having a significant decrease in the spouses who wish to come to Canada if your partner is in Canada already on a study and on a postgraduate work permit, or on a work permit where they are working in Canadian companies. So if I sum this up in a minute, the overall situation is that there are going to be a huge decrease for the people who are currently in Canada and their families are back home. It is kind of sad right now, but it is going to be effective on January 21st. So people who have work permit expiring less than 16 months, Canada is already thinking about that, as soon as their work permit expires, they are going to be making their way towards the back home. So what is the point of getting the spouses in when you have less than 16 months in Canada? So think about that point. If you're already in Canada and if you are in this situation, you still have time, about a week, to work upon it. But after 21st, all these going to be effective, whatever changes I've mentioned in this video. If you are thinking or planning to put your application in, after 21st of January, you have to make sure that you are making the right decision. if you're applying for the work permit in Canada, and if your work permit, let's say if the work permit is already for a year, and it is definitely less than 16 months, so your spouse is not going to be eligible in this factor. And in regards to the tier system, if you're in tier 1 and 2, so you have to be in a very specific field, enabled to apply for your spouses to get in Canada on a work permit. So these are the major changes in the start of 2025. I hope to get like some of the good news. I have mentioned in my earlier videos as well, there are going to be some conferences happening in next couple of days with the Immigration Minister Mark Miller. Let's say, what is that going to be about? It is just in my thinking that is probably going to be the asylum systems in Canada and reform some of the boundaries as well within Canada. So let's see how is that going to impact the overall situation of immigration and the IRB. Thank you very much.